والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so basically for every single person you have to support, um, you have to pay zakat for. Um, we mentioned when do you have to support your wife, when you have to support your children, when you have to support your parents. We mentioned all these things, and your slave, right? So your slave always has to be supported regardless, right? There's no conditions, right? Just like a horse, your horse is unrideable. Do you have to support the horse? Yes. The horse bites you. The horse is dangerous. You still have to support the horse, right? So it's a totally different relationship. Okay. الواجب صاع سليم من العيب. Right? Is to give 4 scoops. A sa' is 4 scoops, right? Which is 0.51 liters of grain, right? So approximately 2 liters of grain. So we're talking about a volume, okay? So you're going to give these 4 scoops of grain that are salim min al-uyub, there's nothing wrong with them. Min ghalibi qut al-balad, which is normally eaten in one's place, right? So let's say that that people eat bread by default, people eat rice by default, people eat um, barley by default, corn, whatever it is, that's going to be the default. Okay. So then it says, well, what about if there's more than one? Okay, it doesn't mention that in the method, but anyway, we'll just mention it. If there is more than one, there's more than one staple. People eat bread and people eat rice. People eat this and eat people that. Then you can give any of them, give either of them, as long as they are equally prevalent, right? And there's also a weak position that you can give the more expensive one, even if it's less common, right? So as far as I know, rice is more expensive than wheat. So imagine, for example, a place where people generally eat bread. Bread is their main staple. Bread, pasta, spaghetti, um, things like that. Borgol, right? If that's their main staple, then you could give rice because it's more expensive, right? But otherwise, we're looking at if there's two that are equally used, then you can give either. If there's one that is slightly more used than the other, you have to give the ghalib, what is more normally used. You cannot give something else. Um, but the weak position is no, you can give something that's more expensive if it is main staple. So you can't just give something that's more expensive. But you say, for example, okay, in your country, do people eat rice? Yes. Okay, rice is more expensive than wheat. So even though it's not the most common thing, I can still give that. Okay? Okay. وإن قدر على بعضه فقط أخرجه. So here's a question, right? If you are only able to pray half of dhuhr, do you pray half of dhuhr?
No.
Okay, what about this? For example, you stay awake, you are conscious for approximately 30 seconds at a time, right? So you come to and you're like, oh my God, I know I'm going to pass out in about 30 seconds. So what you do is you start praying and that's it. You start praying and then you pass out and then you start praying again, etc. Right? You just do what you can do. Okay? You do what you can do. With the fast, you don't do that. Because if you can't do any of it, you can't do all of it, you don't do any of it. So I know that I can't fast the whole day. Then you don't fast any of the day. That's it. So sometimes we do everything we can, and sometimes if you can't do something, you just don't do it. We have that discussion in Tayammum. What if I had enough water to wash my face and my arms, but not wipe my head and wash my feet? What do I do? Do I just make Tayammum? Or do I do the best wudu I can and then make Tayammum? It's a debate, and the relied upon position is that you have to do everything you can. So here, the same logic, you do everything you can, right? So in excess of your needs, you can do, you can pay for some. Okay, you do that. You just pay whatever you can. Okay. So what do you do is then, so it says here, وعند الضيق, when you only have enough for some, يجب أن يقدم نفسه. You pay for yourself. Okay. Can you pay for yourself and your wife? Yes. And then things to do with his wife, her wife. So her khadim. When you say khadim, it does not mean a servant. It means a slave, right? Because you know, a servant is an employee, right? And then his children, and then his father, and grandfather, and great grandfather, and then his mother, etc. You pay for these people. خير. So you just pay for those you can. وإن قدر على بعضه فقط أخرجه. If you can only pay some of it, you pay whatever you can. ويجوز إخراجها في رمضان. So it becomes obligatory as soon as sun sets. All right, the sunset before Eid. However, it's permissible to give it out from the beginning of Ramadan. As soon as Ramadan comes in, you can give it. Now, you might not be obliged. May Allah protect us all. What if somebody in our family were no longer obliged to support them? Right? Then, then no zakat would be due, but you're paying in advance. That's what you're doing. So you pay in advance from the beginning of Ramadan. You can do that. ويسن قبل صلاة العيد, and it's recommended to pay before Eid. Excuse me. ويحرم تأخيرها عن يومه. It is haram to delay it until after the Eid day. So to wait until Maghrib of Eid, that is haram. He says نعم تأخيرها لنحو قريب وجار كزكاة المال أفضل ما لم يؤخرها عن يوم العيد. Right? It is better, right? It is better to delay it uh, till the end of the day if you are waiting for a particular person uh, to come, one of your relatives, for example, or your neighbor. You're waiting for your neighbor to come back, and he's going to come back at the end of the day of Eid. Uh, so, so by default, it is not recommended to delay it after the prayer, but you can, and I believe you can also delay it from the whole day itself. 1 second. Okay, so he mentions here 5 times. So it says waqtul jawaz, permissible time from the beginning of Ramadan, obligatory time, which comes in with sunset, best time, which is before Eid prayer, offensive time, which is after the Eid prayer, unless you have a reason, haram time, which is to delay it after Maghrib of the Eid without a reason. Right? And it doesn't mention here giving it to giving it to relatives and the like after that day. But I believe that's also the case. I'll double check, inshallah. I believe you can also wait a few days to give it to, let's say you're waiting to send it. Let's say, for example, you're going to send it abroad, which is following a weaker position, and you're waiting for the information to send it, and they didn't give it to you yet. Something like that. Wallahu a'lam. But anyway, what it mentions here is it's offensive to delay it after the Eid prayer, but it's better to delay it after the Eid prayer for such a reason. I want to give it to my neighbor, I want to give it to my relative, etc. Um, okay. And so he says, فَإِنْ غَابَ لِمَرْحَلَتَيْنِ فَأَكْثَرَ لَمْ تَجِبْ عَلَيْهِ. What if your gold or your grain or your wealth is in traveling distance? So you are visiting the Bay Area in California, but you live in LA, and your gold bullion, your gold is all in LA, and your grain is all in LA. Okay, so then how do you access money? You don't have the money on you. You just have the money for your travel, and that's it. So in which case, you are considered faqir, right? You're considered poor because you don't have it, right? You're not obliged to travel that far, right? So our world is very, very different, right? So yes, in terms of prayer, we still consider it traveling distance, but in terms of access, I mean, that's not that far away, A. And then B, if everything is a debt, right? You have a bank account and everything's a debt that is owed to you and you can access it immediately, it's a totally different picture, right? But that's in their times in that way of looking at things, that was an excuse. Like there's a piece of gold that you need to give or that you need to use to buy the grain, and that piece of gold is traveling distance away, then you're excused. Okay, everyone's following?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Sheikh.
Okay. So
I have a question.
go ahead, Bismillah.
Um, so I'm pretty sure you must have mentioned this at some point, but let's say that's the case. You have some assets in LA and you're like in a second house in Oregon, and some of those assets in LA are on a farm and they are like goats, like sheep, and like these animals that you um pay zakat normally with an animal.
Yes.
you know um but you're not there, but you have access to your wealth obviously because of banks and things like that. Do you just pay the entire zakat like with money, or do you still have to owe zakat in the form of one of those animals?
Yeah, so in the Shafi school, we're going to say you can't give its monetary equivalent. You can't do that. So the zakat due on
Okay.
camels is by default camels, etc. Yeah, you couldn't do that.
Yeah. Hmm.
So the issue is, would you be obliged to travel? So now I have to fly in order to go and do this. Am I obliged to do that? The answer is no, because it's traveling
Hmm.
distance. As opposed to less than traveling distance, like, oh man, so you're telling me I have to walk or from Brentwood to Concord. So yeah, but that's far. So yeah, that's normal, right? So there's a level of difficulty that you're obliged to do, and a level of difficulty you're not obliged to do. And we live in a very unique, weird situation where suddenly this level of difficulty has been relieved on a certain level, right? So it's kind of like If you can imagine difficulty, say difficulty, difficulty changes the Sharia, right? Like, so for them, traveling was like, yeah, of course, traveling is difficult. That's like going on a hike, you know? Like going on a hike is difficult. For us, it's like it's really easy. But that's because we're just in a very particular situation right now where it's kind of like, yeah, it's just really suddenly miraculously easy. It's like, imagine on a hike and then suddenly everybody has like wings on their feet and can just climb up the mountain in 1 second, right? The rukhsa still applies, basically. The issue is it's not always the case. So there are certain issues, for example, when we're talking about distance, where it's really not the case. So like he's like, oh, I can't access my money. It's far away. It's like, well, it's not that far away, right? Similarly about like wilaya, or your guardianship over your daughter. They say that if you travel away from your daughter, right, then you're really far from her. So now she has a right to get married. So she can get married without your consent, and somebody else can give the permission instead. Today, that would mean that you drive to work and like day in and day out, like on your way, you drove to work and suddenly she got married and you came back. It's like, what's going on, right? A normal commute is suddenly traveling distance. So some of these things are clearly not the same. Some of these things are. So here we're talking about accessing money. Can you access it? Yes, you can. But your question is, do I give in cash or do I give in cows? You give in cows. Well, I can't get to my cows right now. So okay, you're not obliged to pay right now, but it is accruing. It's still adding up.
Okay, and
Yeah.
the second question is in that situation, I mean, would you still pay from the cash that you do have access to, and then later you pay for whatever the livestock you have?
You can do that. You could, yeah, you can. So we're not obliged to, right? So let's say it's another country, right? You've got your farm in Panama, and you can send money to go and buy sheep, right? Just every Ramadan, you just send this person, here we go, like whatever. Here's some money, buy some sheep and give them away, right? You can do that, but not obliged to do that because the sheep that you have to access are in another place.
Yeah, what I meant to ask was like 90% of your wealth is in cash,
Mm-hmm.
10% of it is in livestock.
Okay.
Um, and you don't have access to the livestock right now, but you do have access to the cash, so you can
Yeah, so
take
if
care
you
of
don't
your
have
cash
access to the
portion.
if you don't have access to the livestock, you're just not obliged to pay it now, but it is adding up.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you wanted to, you can follow the Hanafi school. The Hanafi school, they say, you can just pay in cash for anything. All of these things can convert into value. So in the Hanafi
Hmm.
school, you can do, like for us, for example, we say, in the Shafi school, we say for trade goods, you have to pay in cash. You can't pay in trade goods. Like if you have stock, you can't just give stock away in zakat. They say, well, you can give either. The point is that value of money. So you have to give a cow of this age, okay, meaning that value of money. So for them, it's always convertible. You can give it in any form of wealth. So you can give zakat al amwal for them in form of rent or something like that. Like
Yeah.
you could like give somebody access to a house for free, and that's your way of paying. That's your way of paying zakat. So for them, they just look at the value. What is the value of the wealth that you gave away? That's it. For us, we're like, no, that's not the case. The Prophet ﷺ specifically said X, right? And so it's not just arbitrary. It's not just like, or it's monetary equivalent, you know? And this is the position of the Hanbalis and the Malikis as well. It's not just the Shafis. Like you can't, um, it's like an act of worship, right? Like you just have to do it as it is. Okay,
Also,
go ahead.
will the time get delayed if I couldn't go and give if I'm far away and if I cannot reach my livestock? So will the time of the zakah, which is
Yeah,
here,
it will. It will. So just like your money, imagine you had pieces of gold, okay, that are in another country, okay. So you have in Pakistan, for example, you have pieces of gold. Now, is it easy for an Indian to go to Pakistan?
no, not at all.
No. So the money is accruing, but that 5 years later, when you got in, that's when you have to give all the money back. Give the money away.
Okay, so for an year or for 5 years?
for 5 years. So it's
For
all
5 years.
adding up, but you're just not sinful for not giving it away,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, okay. So the amount is fixed
Hmm.
and it's getting adding up. So it doesn't matter when we are paying.
Yeah,
It matters what we are paying,
exactly.
and time will be the same. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
same
Yeah.
uh,
Hmm. Um,
One more doubt, Stas.
Bismillah.
Uh, uh, I wanted to understand what brother has just asked. Like the Shafi'is say that they have to give the zakah on livestock only in such situation and not the cash.
Yes. So if you have livestock, you cannot give cash. So you owe 2 sheep. You say, okay, the 2 sheep cost this much money. I'll give this money away. You can't do that. That doesn't
Okay.
count.
Okay, Jazakallah.
So with sheep, you have to give sheep. With grain, you have to give grain. So great. So in as zakat al-fitr is for most people in cities is pointless. So why are you going to give me some wheat? You know,
Okay,
you know.
Jazakallah.
So so most people in the world, even if they're not Hanafi, they follow the Hanafi position because it's just more practical. People it benefits the poor more. Yeah. And Imam Bukhari he narrates. I don't know if it's Sahih or not from Sayyidina Mu'adh. So Sayyidina Mu'adh he was in Yemen, and Yemen they had a lot of cloth, a lot of fabrics. So he charged them in fabric as opposed to in cattle. So he said this is easier for you because you have fabric, and it's better for the people in Medina and these kind of places because they don't have fabric. Fabric is very expensive for them. So it's actually a win-win situation. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it says فصل وتجب النية. Right. You have to have an niyyah. So if you gave some charity away and then you realized, oh, I was actually obliged to pay the zakat, that doesn't count, right? So وتجب النية. فينوي هذه زكاة مالي. You intend that this is your zakat, all the likes, right? Now, in principle, um, you have to have azm, you have to have like resolve and know what you're doing. But in reality, there's certain things that are overlooked. So, for example, you give some charity away and say, "Oh Allah, if I'm obliged to give charity, if I'm obliged to give zakat, this is my zakat." Right? You can't do that in prayer. You can't say, "Oh Allah, if it's dhuhr time, I'm praying dhuhr, Allahu Akbar." You can't do that. Right? Oh Allah, if I need to make wudu, this is my wudu. But I'm not sure if I need to make wudu. That doesn't count. You can't do that. But here you can, right? Because it is tricky. Like it's not very clear exactly where the line is. And so you intend, so you say, Oh Allah, I'm giving this money away. One sheikh said I'm obliged to give zakat, the other one said I'm not. Oh Allah, if zakat is due, I'm paying my zakat now. Right? One estimation put it as 1,200, the other one's 1,400. So I'm going to give 1,400 and say, Oh Allah, that 200 extra, if it is zakat, I intend as zakat. If it is not, then it is sadaqah. You can do that. Um, okay. So here there's a debate between Ibn Hajar and Ramli. You had a basket or a bucket or a bin of grain, okay? Of gold, of grain, of sheep. You put the sheep to the side, right? So this sheep over here, these sheep you're gonna give in zakat. says lower walau. So Imam Ramli says walau nawa az-zakata ma'al ifraz. Okay, you separated these two sheep in order to give away in zakat. You haven't given them away in zakat. You put them to the side. فأخذها صبي أو كافر ودفعها لمستحقها. Right, and then along came a child and basically took them away. Or a kafir who doesn't have a niyyah. So the child doesn't have a niyyah and the kafir doesn't have a niyyah. And he gave them to the poor. Right? أو أخذها المستحق. Or somebody came along who deserves it and took it. ثم علم المالك. And then thereafter you realize what happened. أجزأه, it'll be enough. Because you intended when you separated it. Even though you didn't intend it when it was given. Does that make sense? When it was given, there was no intention because it was a child. There was no intention because it was a kafir. Or it was taken, so there's no intention. But the point is you intended when you separated. That's the position of Ramli. Ibn Hajar disagrees. He says, وَيَجُوزُ تَعْجِيلُهَا قَبْلَ الْحَوْلِ. It is permissible to give zakat before its time, which is a huge convenience. Right? وشرط إجزاء المعجل أن يبقى المالك أهلا للوجوب إلى آخر الحول وأن يكون القابض في آخر الحول مستحقا. Okay, so classic scenario. Badr contacts Lenart and says, I need some financial help. Lenart says, listen, I'm not actually able to give charity. I can't do that, but I will give zakat. Okay, so now zakat is now. So he says, I'll give that to you next Ramadan. The Badr's like, oh my God, I'm in a situation right now. Can you please help? So now Lenart says, okay, I will pay zakat early. So he's paying now zakat, right? Before it's due, okay, but no more than a year. You can't do more than a year, okay. But he's doing more, he's doing before it's due by 300 and whatever, by almost a year. In order for this to be zakat, number one, when the year does end, then Lenart still has to be zakat. Zakat still has to be due on him. So if now the zakat is not due on him, then there's not really zakat, is it? Right? And that's not very practical. On the other side, Badr has to be zakat eligible at the end of the year. Okay, so Lenart gave him the money now. We're going to look at the time when the money is actually due. Is Badr actually eligible? Right? So what happened then is Badr got a job, got this, got that, whatever it was, and he's not zakat eligible anymore. Okay? And it's not that he's not zakat eligible because of that money that was given to him. Obviously that would be fine, right? Lenart gives him $1 million, right? And he's not zakat eligible because he's been given money. That's fine. But from other than that, from his own income, from other gifts, from whatever it is. Okay? So now what do we do if it's not valid? So Lenart says, listen, I don't want to be cruel, I don't want to be mean, but I'm in a financial situation. I actually can't give more than I'm obliged to give. So I'm going to stipulate right now that if I don't have to pay zakat by the end of this year, and if you are not zakat eligible by the end of this year, I want the money back. Okay? But what Lenart cannot do is send a bunch of money to somebody who doesn't know that it's early, who doesn't know that Lenart is going to ask for it back, and then ask for it back. You can't do that. Does that make sense? So we said, you can do it a year early. That's fine. You can, you can't do it more than a year early. And when we say a year, we mean a lunar year. It's only zakat if you still have to pay zakat at the end of the year. And if they are still a zakat recipient at the end of the year. If you explain the situation to them and say, listen, I want my money back if this is not the case, then they have to give the money back. Okay? But you can't just give it to somebody without them knowing, okay, that it's zakat A, that you want to have it claim it back, etc., and then ask for it back. You can't do that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. It says, وَشَرْطُ إِجْزَاء الْمُعَجَّل. The condition for this to be valid is what? That the Malik, the owner, still has to pay zakat until the end of the lunar year. And that the person receiving it is still eligible. Right? And so if that's not the case, أُسْتُرِدَّ إِنَّ عَلِمَ الْقَابِضُ أَنَّهَا زَكَاةٌ مُعَجَّلَةٌ. He can take it back. Hey, I didn't actually have to pay that. Or you're not actually as zakat eligible. Then if you knew that it was zakat and it was paid early, then you can then fine. Otherwise you can't do that. You can't take it back. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different categories of zakat eligible people. So it says وَيَجِبُ صَرْفَ الزَّكَاةِ إِلَى الْمَوْجُودِينَ مِنَ الْأَصْنَافِ الثَّمَانِيَةِ. It is obligatory to give zakat to those who are present of the 8 categories. Meaning you look in your city. Where do you live? Or where your money is. Right? So again, Badr, his money is in one city, his farm with his sheep are in another city, another country. So that's 2 different things. Right. So the farm animals are going to be given to where the farm to that place where the animals are, whereas his money is somewhere else. Right. um. So, but the default is you have to give to at least 3 people in the whichever categories of those 8 categories that exist in your city, and you cannot give outside of the city, you cannot give to less than 3 people, and you cannot give to just one category. That is the madhab. Okay. So in your category, there's 5 categories. In your city, there's 5 categories of this. There's 4. There's 2. There's 1. You have to, excuse me, you have to give to all of them. إنما الصدقات للفقراء و. The verse of the Quran mentions and. You have to give to all of them. You can't just give to some of them. Right? Okay. Okay. However, he says here لكن اختار جمع جواز صرفها إلى 3 فقراء أو مساكين وآخرون جوازه للواحد فالعمل به ليس خارجا عن المذهب. He says a number of scholars of the Shafi'is have adopted the position you can just give to just 3 poor or just 3 people in each category, in fact, or even just 1, right? And even outside of your country as well. So I gave all my zakat to my uncle in Bangladesh. It's fine. So then it says the first category again is al-fuqara. Al-fuqara. So it says in the commentary, جمع فقير وهو من لا نفقة له واجبة ولا مال ولا كسب حلال يقع جميعها أو مجموعها موقعا من كفايته مطمعا وملبسا ومسكنا وغيرها مما لا بد منه على ما يليق به وبممونه. So it's somebody who does not have nobody supporting. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any halal income. So no savings, no means of a halal income. Um, he من لا نفقة له. Um, من لا نفقة له. There's nobody supporting him. And if you added up his savings plus his income, it would not suffice كفايته. It wouldn't be enough for him to eat, to dress, to live, and other things that normal people like him need. So say, well, why do you need a fridge? So, well, that's quite a basic thing, Habibi. Why do you need to eat meat? Right? Say, well, I haven't eaten meat for the last 3 months. So that's kind of like, isn't that normal? Like, right? So things like, so we're not talking about actually on the poverty line. We're talking about, normally speaking, this person is, they don't have a kind of, um, yeah, it's not enough, right? So this person is in genuinely difficult situations. So therefore it's going to be relative. So somebody who lives in a tent and they're totally fine. They have a jug. They live in a tent with no AC and no access to healthcare. And they when they go and buy food, they walk for 100 miles, and that's just normal for them, right? It's totally fine. They're not poor. Whereas somebody else who doesn't have healthcare, who has to walk 100 miles, who has to, they're considered poor. So poor is relative then, right? It's relative. All right. And so then it says, well, if you have so what if somebody has a form of income, you could work, but you don't. You have a form of income, but you don't, right? So this person has graduated and they're like, I don't want to, it's not very good, right? So, and al-kasub, the person who can work, غير فقير, he's not poor. وإن لم يكتسب, even if he doesn't. So he doesn't have any money. So yeah, but you could work, right? وهو كذلك. That's what it means, right? So he says, ولكن الكسب لا يخرج or لا يخرج عن الفقر إلا إن لاق به من غير مشقة لا تحتمل عادة ووجد من يستعمله. So two conditions. Number one, it's an appropriate job. Number two, there's somebody who can employ me. Right? So I'm from Uganda and I'm a doctor. I come to America and they say you're not allowed to work, right? So well, I could work, but I'm not allowed to work. So you're now considered faqir. Or now I get my work permit, but they don't recognize my qualifications. So they said, well, here you go, you work in McDonald's. So is it appropriate for a doctor to work in McDonald's? Right? So in which case it's going to be, in reality, it's to some extent it is relative as well, right? So in certain cultures, that will be a mashaqqa la tuhtamilu adatan. That will be extremely, extremely difficult. Like the person might have a heart attack, right? It's like really, really difficult, right? So who here is Sheikh Mahmoud, right? You're in India, correct, right? Social status is quite important, right? Like what you do and what you don't do. These things are quite important in the East, correct?
Yeah.
Right? So like, if there was some guy who's a judge, for example, and then now he has to be a guard in front and like or do valet parking for people. Like that wouldn't be easy, right?
Yes.
It would be like extremely hard. It's not just kind of difficult. It's extremely hard. It's not that he's lazy. It's that it's really and in reality as well, it could affect his career, right? So now he's like, oh, that's that judge who worked as a he was a he worked. I saw him sweeping the street yesterday. So they're like, how can he be a judge? So actually, he lost the future of his career by doing that. So in most traditional societies, life is like that, where there is such thing as tabaqiyya, this class, and it's like that's just something you don't do. You just don't do that. Whereas in the West, there's less of that, right? So it's not mashaqqa la tuhtam al It's not like extremely difficult. It's like it's okay, right? So I'm not really sure to what extent it applies in the West. You are a brain surgeon, you had some problem with your eyesight, so you can't do your job properly, and your license as a doctor got taken away. So now you can't do that. Okay, can you teach science in schools? Like, no. Can you do this? Can you do that? And the only thing you can do is menial work. Is that considered مشقة لا تحتمل عادة? Is that considered too difficult? Right? But generally speaking, yes, right? Like this is my field, there's a certain kind of thing that you work in, and it'd be extremely weird for you to come out of that thing, right? وَوَجَدَ مَنْ يَسْتَعْمِلُهُ, right? I'm a doctor, I don't find anybody to employ me, you know. So many of these people, you know, you could imagine, for example, like say like a refugee could be like that, right? Like this politician who's a refugee, you know? Like he 40 years he's in politics and now he's a refugee and you're asking him to sweep the streets, you know? So so you got to find work that's appropriate for that person, right? And so if you can't find work that's appropriate for that person, um, then he's considered faqir. He's considered somebody who is not able to work. She says, accordingly, فَالْمُلُوكُ وَنَحْوُهُمْ وَأَتْبَاعُهُمْ فُقَرَاء. So he says, kings and the like, they are poor, right? إِذْ لَا مَالَ لَهُمْ halal. They don't have any halal money, right? So this is an important point, right? When you look at, for example, I think they said about King Charles, like something like the British Navy is like unbelievably in debt to the royal family because they have a ridiculous amount of money. So when we see in the past, right, extremely wealthy Muslim rulers, 99% of the time that's not halal at all, right? It's not halal at all. Like that's not their money. And so they have all this wealth, but it's like, why do you have all this wealth, right? There's no reason for a king to be wealthy, right? A king should be paid by the state, and if he can't be paid by the state, then he's paid by zakat because he's our ruler and we need him to do a job, and that's it. So they don't have a means to work because their job occupies them. A, they do communal obligation. B, there's no job that's suitable for them. ولا قدرة لهم على كسب لائق بهم. There's no job that they could do that would be an appropriate job, right? Today it's different. You can get paid to be a politician, right? That's the job, right? And you can do different things in politics to find another job, right? But that's not how it was back then. ومن له مال وعليه دين غير فقير حتى يصرفه في دينه, right? So I have $1 million, but I owe $1 million. Until you spend the $1 million on the debt, you're not considered faqir, right? Right, and so that's what we mean in this chapter here. There's another topic. Other topics mean something else, but here that's what we mean. Okay, so the person does not make enough money to do basic things that they need on a normal life, how they live life normally. Right? So do I need to have a PS5 in order to survive life? No. Do I need to have a fridge? Yes. Do I need to have a car? Oh, it depends where you live, right? But let's say in America, somebody doesn't have a car, that they're considered very poor because, right? Whereas somebody who lives in Oxford, for example, in England, you don't need a car, or in London, it's not a big deal. Oh, I don't have a car. It's not a big deal. You probably don't want to drive. It's kind of pointless. Okay, so that's category number one. Any questions there? So what about the person who's looking for work? So I can work and I'm looking for work. I just haven't been employed yet, or I haven't been paid yet. So we live in a paradigm, right, where if it was like this, hey, pick up this bag and I'll give you $2, right? That's easy, but it's not like that, right? I just came to this country. I'm looking for work. I can, in principle, work in this country. So I'm not saying that there's no work, I just haven't found it yet, A. B, I haven't been paid yet, right? So obviously, what am I going to do, right? So this person, until they get paid, they are going to be, because the norm now is that you're on a salary and you get paid at the end of the month. So therefore, you have this month like, oh, I don't know what to do, right? So somebody like that, a doctor that moved from Europe to America. Oh, but you're going to be a doctor. So yeah, but I'm going through all this paperwork right now, so I can't actually work, right? And now, oh, I've got my job, but they haven't paid me yet, right? So you're going to be zakat eligible during that time, right? And here's a question: what about a woman, right? So we said with your mother, you're not obliged to support you're not obliged to pay for your mother to get married, right? But you are obliged to support your mother, right? Is a woman obliged to get married? Like you say, well, you know, you're a young lady. I'm sure there's like a bunch of people who like to marry you. So why did you go and get married? Why am I giving you zakat?
She's not obliged.
She's not obliged to get married, right? She's not obliged to get married. So yeah, but you can just go and get married. In fact, that millionaire just proposed to you. Why don't you go and get married to him? She's like, I don't want to marry him, right? So she's not obliged to do that. Right? That's very different. That's not so. In some ways, marriage is a mercantile relationship. In some ways, but not in all ways. So you're not obliged to go and get married in order to make money. Inshallah, that makes sense. Okay. Another example of inappropriate is here's this, for example, somebody from a certain culture. Okay. So they're from a very, very conservative culture. Let's say they're coming from Yemen. Okay. So there is a politician who's coming from Yemen or a teacher. I don't know how it works, but like, let's say, for example, they're used to working in a male only situation. So for them, you put them in an office or female, you put her in an office with men and women. That's غير لائق. It's not appropriate, right? It's just like that'll be so weird for them, so weird. Like that's like, oh my God, that's not a situation they've ever been. So she was a headmistress of a principal of a school in Yemen, and it's like an all girl school, and she only works with women. And then suddenly it's like, oh, it's okay, you can come and get this job now as you know principal of the school. Like you have all this experience and you speak English and da 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 da. So yeah, but I'm not used to working with men. That's really, really weird. So it's not just awkward, it's super awkward and culturally inappropriate for her. Does that make sense? Or for him,
Yes.
right? Um, so there's certain things that are like that. It's not a small issue, right? Khair. Okay, then masakin. And if it's okay, inshallah, we'll stop here. The next then is inshallah we'll come back to masakin inshallah next week. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Jazakallah, Ustaz.
بارك فيك.